Okay, a good Vach, a Freiliche Vach. Truth is that we don't need to say stories about the past. Talk about stories that are happening right now in Eretz Yisrael, miracles and wonders. I'm sure you heard about the uh, bombs that were placed in these buses in Israel. Unfortunately, it seems like whatever we know about what has happened is a lot smaller than what actually happened. But but there's definitely we do know is that there were five buses that terrorists plotted to bomb, and three buses actually exploded. Two of them, Baruch Hashem, didn't, but three buses exploded. And where did they explode? And when did they explode? They exploded in in the parking lot at night because the terrorists, instead of setting the bomb to explode at 9 o'clock in the morning, miraculously they set it to explode at 9 o'clock at night. It's a miracle of biblical proportions. It sounds like just a inadvertent mistake, but it was a very well planned and well thought out plot, and yet this detail is a out, open and clear miracle. It reminds me of where the Torah describes the valley of Arnon. There are two kinds of miracles, two songs the Torah talks about. The Jewish people sang to Hashem on two different occasions. We sang to Hashem at the valley of Arno, and we sang to Hashem at the edge of the Reed Sea. After the Egyptians drowned in the Reed Sea, so we sang to Hashem in thanks for the miracle and how we survived and how the Egyptians were all obliterated. But that miracle was saving us from a calamity. The calamity was clear and the fear was clear. And yet Hashem miraculously saved us from this calamity. But in the later on in the Torah, we read about how when the Jewish people were passing between two mountains on the way to Israel, there were people standing on the outside of these caves, and they were planning to throw rocks and all kinds of things at the Jewish people as they're walking between these mountains. And miraculously, one mountain moved in close to the other mountain and it pulverized all those who were inside the caves. And the Jewish people had no idea that anyone was standing in ambush. They only discovered in the well of Miriam, they discovered the remains of those standing in ambush. So that second kind of miracle, in a way, is a far greater blessing, because instead of having the angst, the frustration, not knowing what's going to happen, and then seeing how Hashem protects you, in the second miracle, without you don't even know that there was any issue in the first place. You don't discover, oh, Hashem saved me. And that's how this miracle was that Hashem did for us this week. Again, the proportions of this we don't know, but they're talking about five buses, and there's other details which are emerging. It seems like there was a lot more that is not yet public knowledge, but even a little we do know is that there was a coordinated attack of five buses at least, and that yet now one person is hurt. But why 9 o'clock a.m., 9 o'clock p.m.? It's something that Hashem did for us in a way that is reminiscent of the fourth blessing that we recite every time we have a meal. Every time we have a meal, we have to recite four blessings. The fourth blessing is called Atov HaMeitiv. The reason we say this fourth blessing is because of a miracle that happened with Harugei Beitar. After the Jewish people revolted against the Romans, and at the end of after the destruction of the Second Temple, the Romans vanquished the revolt in Beitar, and the Romans decreed that all those who were part of the revolt cannot be buried. But then eventually they rescinded the decree and they were allowed to be buried. So every time we have a meal, we recite a fourth blessing in the after the meal called Hatova Meita, the one who is good and does good. And the reason that blessing is recited is because of the double miracle. First of all, that Hashem did good for us and allowed those who passed away to be buried, and a double miracle that those who passed away, their bodies did not decay, and therefore we thank Hashem for that miracle of their bodies not decaying and us being allowed to bury them. But why is that miracle so significant? There are many miracles that have happened throughout our history, and I'll, God willing, share 3 more tonight. But that miracle seems to be something which is not so fundamental, and yet every time any Jew in the whole world has a meal for thousands of years, they remember that miracle. And the reason is why that's so significant is because after the destruction of the temple, people thought that God was no longer with the Jewish people, that God had left. And that miracle, which happened after the destruction of the temple, highlighted that Hashem is still with us. And perhaps we needed to see this additional miracle this week, considering all the tragedy that was exposed last week, to make us realize that we're not alone and Hashem is with us. So on that note, I want to share with you 3 stories. These stories come from Sichas HaShavua, excellent publication from Chabad in Israel. And the first story is about a tzaddik who founded the Lisker Hasidic dynasty. This tzaddik was visiting the town of Munkach, and he was meeting all the dignitaries in Munkach and all the simple people in Munkach. And this, his name was Tzvi Hirsch Friedman. And while he was holding court and speaking to all these various members of the community, there was a one poor gentleman who he needed to marry off his daughter, and he told the Rebbe he needs a blessing because the other party, the groom's family, said that unless he finds funding, they're going to call off the wedding. So immediately, this Rabbi Tzvi Friedman from the Lisker Hasidic dynasty, he immediately takes the full amount. People had given him donations as customary when asking for a blessing from a tzaddik to also donate money to tzedakah, to charity. So he opened the envelopes, he took out the entire amount, and he gave it to the hands of this poor guy. So one of the dignitaries of the city was appalled. And he said to the rabbi, to Rabbi Tzvi Friedman, this Lisker Rebbe, he said, I don't understand something. How do you give so much money to one person? There are many people who need help. Why are you deciding to give all of this money just to this one guy? So the Lisker Rebbe responded the following. He says, when I was just newly married, so I'll tell you how I learned this, how to behave like this. I was newly married. I was a teacher. I was teaching these 2 children, and I didn't have any money. And I really wanted to see the Sar HaShalom, the Belzer Rebbe. I wanted to visit him for Shavuos, but I had no money, and I didn't know what to do. I really had this burning desire in my heart to see the Belzer Rebbe, but I was very, very far from there. And I decided I'm just going to walk on the journey and see what happens. Maybe Hashem will help me get there. So I was walking for a long time, and my feet became so blown up from this journey. It was terrible. And I arrived in this town, and I was hoping that I will sit and study Torah. By sitting and studying Torah, perhaps I'll get my mind off of the pain in my feet. And as I'm sitting there in the synagogue, immersed in my studies, I hear this tumult outside. What's a tumult? There's a whole caravan of people who are traveling together to see the Belzer Rebbe for Shavuos. Amazing. Wow. Answer to my prayers. I can now go with this group and go to the Belzer Rebbe. I'll go to see the Sar HaShalom. So I went outside and I go to over to the one of the men part of the leading the caravan, and I said I wanted to join, and can I please come on the caravan? And the leader of the caravan says, no, you can't come for free. It costs 60. Um, I know the name of the currency. $60, whatever $60 was, and so this was in the city of Lvov. In the city of Lvov, on the way to Belz, they had stopped off, and he tells me you have to pay this amount of money, the 60 greitzer, whatever greitzer are. Pay 60 greitzer, then you can come on the come on the wagon. I said, but how will I get 60? I don't have 60 greitzer. I'm a school teacher. I don't have the money. But leader of the caravan said, Tzvi Hirsch Friedman said, I'm sorry, but this is the rule. Everyone who was here has participated in the cost. You have to participate in the cost, then you can come. Otherwise, you can't come. He said, listen, we're going to be leaving in 2 hours. In 2 hours, go out, ask for help. People will, and maybe you'll get the 60 gratia. I'd never done this before in my life. I never asked for help in my life. But I started walking around. And the way it worked was, in those days, when people would ask for help, the response was, would you like money or would you like merchandise? That's what people would respond. So the first guy I went to is a tailor. You want money or merchandise? I said merchandise. I thought maybe that's better. He gave me this metal iron sheet. All right. I went to another guy asking for money, merchandise. He said merchandise. I said merchandise. Third guy gave me a button, and someone gave me some yarn, and I realized that the hour is almost over, and I'm not going to get the 60 greitzer. And finally, I went into another store, and I just burst out crying. I burst out crying, and the owner of the store says, "What's wrong?" I told him what's wrong, and he just counted out the 60 greitzer, and he gave the 60 greitzer, and I ran to the caravan. And I gave the 60 greitzer to the guy, and I learned then, when someone needs help, don't send them begging, don't send them asking. They need help, be there for them. If you're able to help, just help them. Don't make a whole tumult about it. Just be there fully, let them and solve the issue. Don't make them run around. That's what I learned there. And you want to know who I learned this from? I learned this from you. I remember you. You were the one who was arranging that caravan. You were the one who asked for the 60 greitzer. That's story number one, highlighting how if we are able to help someone, we should do it all the way and not halfway, and tell people to go ask and beg. And when you're able to help, just open your heart and your wallet and make it happen. Similar, a story of kindness. This story happened during the end of World War II. This was in 1942, actually not the end of World War II, in 1942 in the Zhurin camp in Transnistria, which is somewhere in the Ukraine. There were thousands of Jews in this ghetto who were deported there for hard labor. And in addition to all the other conditions of hunger, they were also freezing. Many people froze to death, Rahman al-Islam. And one of the people in the ghetto was Rabbi Yaakov Yisachar Ber Rosenbaum. He was the eighth Rebbe at Varna, and he was then 12 years old. And he and his father were together in this ghetto, in this labor camp, and it really bothered him to see his fellow Jews freezing. So he would go around in his thin coat, walking around trying to find scraps of wood to give people who needed wood to get some respite from the cold. Every day we walk around, and one day he meets this Gentile farmer. The farmer says, "You're looking for wood?" He says, "Yeah, I'm looking for wood." He says, "Come with me." They go together to a forest. And then the boy is thinking, you know what, this is probably not a good idea. This Gentile is probably going to do something not good to me. I mean, in the middle of the forest, I'm alone over here. Why would he offer me, a little boy, a business deal? But sure enough, they come into some clearing in the forest. And the farmer shows him a whole load of firewood, bundles and bundles of firewood. And he tells the boy a price. The boy says, okay, I'm going to go get the money. And the farmer told him how to go back to the labor camp. He goes back to labor camp. But the problem was he had to get the money. But he and his father, they worked very hard and they got the money. But the additional problem was this. There were guards always looking out for people for misconduct. Bringing in all this firewood from outside was certainly something that would deserve a beating, or if not worse. So he asked his father what to do, and his father and he were not sure what the next move was. They met the farmer at midnight, gave him the money. What should they do now? The only ones in the street now are the guards. So the Nedvorner Rebbe went to the electric fuse box that supplied electricity for the entire camp. And he took a stone and he broke it open and he broke the main fuse and he ruined the entire electricity, shut the whole electricity down for the whole camp. And he knew it would take many hours to fix it. And because all electricity was down, the guards had to take care of that. And then he was able to bring the firewood in. They saved many people's lives with that act. Sometimes the way to help, like in the first story, is not to make calculations, and like in the second story, sometimes you just gotta go push yourself and go a little harder and think out of the box. Which brings us to our third story, fascinating story. The third story happened in 1986. They're living in France. There was a family that was having a very hard time because their son, who was 1 year old, could not walk because of a tremendous pain in his hips, and they couldn't find a cure for his pain, so they were really at a loss. It was in the neighborhood called Saint Denis, suburb near Paris. The Eisenfeld family was having this problem with their son Zion. And again, the pain was so severe he couldn't walk. And so Miriam, his mother, she took her son to a family doctor, another doctor. Finally, she brought him to a Professor Flerin. He was a pediatric orthopedist who was the director of the orthopedic department at the Necker Children's Hospital. But he also couldn't figure it out. But after a lot of discussion, the doctor said we should operate on this child and try to lengthen his leg muscles. That might bring relief to his pain. But imagine his mother was not interested in operating her 1.5-year-old because maybe this will help his pain. She wasn't interested in doing this, but there's no other choice, but she refused. And she just kept giving her son painkiller, which made her son sleep most of the day. And the doctors were telling her she's breaking the law by refusing treatment. She has to give her son his treatment. 8 months go by like this. 8 months of suffering. One Thursday, Miriam went to the local butcher to buy food for Shabbos. And the butcher says, "You look so worried, what's going on?" And she tells the butcher how 8 months her son's suffering. And another customer heard the story and says to her, "Why don't you write a letter to the Rebbe? Ask the Rebbe for a bracha." So she never heard about the Rebbe before, but she knew that this other customer says, "Speak to Rabbi Hillel Pesner." Rabbi Hillel Pesner, Al V'Shalom, I had the great privilege to meet on many occasions, who was the Rebbe's emissary there in Paris. And she met Rabbi Pevsner, and I'm sorry, she met Rabbi. She got the number for Rabbi Pevsner, and on the way home, she met her neighbor. Her neighbor told her that her brother works at this Necker Medical Center, and her brother said that he heard the doctor saying that they're going to issue a forced hospitalization on this baby, on this 1.5-year-old, because the parents are not acting legally. They're not allowed to refuse this operation. and they're going to take away the child and give him a forced hospitalization. So you can imagine how stressed she was. She called Rabbi Pevzner's home, and his wife answered, and she said, "My husband's not coming home till 8 o'clock, till late." She said, "And anytime he comes, please tell him to call me." 2 o'clock in the morning, he calls her. And she tells Rabbi Pevzner the whole story, her son's medical condition, and the danger of him being taken forcibly to surgery. Rabbi Pevzner said, "I'm going to call the Rebbe's office." And 10 o'clock in the morning the next day, an answer came back from the Rebbe. He calls Miriam Eisenberg and tells her, "I got an answer from the Rebbe." What did the Rebbe say? What did the Rebbe say? He said, the Rebbe gave a bracha. The Rebbe gave a blessing. What was the blessing? The blessing was Shabbat Shalom. She have a peaceful Shabbat. So she was confused and she was disappointed. She was waiting by her phone all night for the answer from the Rebbe. And now this answer comes, Shabbat Shalom. It's something we say to each other all the time on Shabbat. We wouldn't even think of it having any meaning. And this was the answer from the Rebbe for a problem. While she was thinking about this, she heard a voice. She turns her head and she sees her son, Tzion, now already 2 years old, getting out of bed and walking towards the door of the house. She couldn't believe her eyes. Tzion started knocking on the door and saying he wants to go outside. So the mother says, Miriam says to Tzion, "Do you want to go out in the garden?" He says, "Yes." So Tzion didn't have shoes because he couldn't walk. So Miriam took a pair of his sister's shoes and went out to the garden with him. And she thought she was imagining it, but he went in the sandbox, going up and down the slide as if nothing happened. And now she understood what the Rebbe said, Shabbat Shalom. That was a special and moving Shabbos for the entire family. The child's pain went away, and he developed like all children his age. That time, Rabbi Mendel Belanov moved into that area and began a Chabad center there, and a warm relationship began between the Eisenbergs and the Belanovs. And because of this, the Eisenbergs became more observant in Shabbat and kosher. And this boy, Tzion, he grew up, and in 2006, he was studying in the Heart Institute in Jerusalem. And one day he called his mother and told his mother that he has pain in his hips. So what did his mother do? She called Rebbetzin Pevzner. Rabbi Hillel Pevzner already passed away. She called Mrs. Pevzner. And she called one of her grandchildren in New York to go to the Ohel of the Rebbe. And her grandson went to the Ohel, and she called back her son, "How are you doing?" "Well, I'm a little better, but I still have pain." She called back Rebbetzin Pevzner. "I'm not satisfied. My son needs to get completely better." So Rebbetzin Pevzner calls her grandson again, "Please go again to the Rebbe, ask her for a blessing, she should get completely better." And a few days later, she calls her son. She asks her son, "How are you doing?" "What do you mean, how am I doing?" "What about your legs, your pain?" What pain? It's gone. This is the same child, Baruch Hashem, who today a rabbi and has his own family. He serves as a manager at a high-tech company and teaches Chassidus to members of the French community in Ashkelon. Peaceful Shabbos, peaceful Shabbos. Hashem should bless us all. We should have a good Vach, a freilich Vach, a peaceful Vach, and we just bless the month of Adar, the joyous month of Adar. It should be a truly joyous month with Ava, V'yachva, Shalom, V'reos, as we said in the blessing today, L'chayim, L'shalim, L'simcha, L'yeshua, L'chama,